The purpose of this video is to help you get a bit of a jump start on your MT Engage assignment and help you to avoid some common pitfalls and traps and struggles that students have with the assignment. The first thing that I want to point out, and the most common mistake that I see, is that students have a tendency to want to give me a finance project instead of an economics project. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, in a video where I kind of introduced the concept, I pointed out a business, and that business broke down their cost into fixed and variable costs. And a lot of you see that and you want to do that. And instead of talking about the economics of fixed and variable cost and what actually makes a cost fixed or variable, you try to give me a budget. Now, what I want to point out to you is that at no point in this class did we ever build a budget for a business. Ever, not once. And I get students who pour hours into building a really nice budget, and I have to tell them, hey, that's great, but you're not doing economics. You're making a budget. That's not actually an economics concept. We did talk about budgets with the consumer and their budget constraint, but if you look back over what we did in the class this semester, not once did we ever address a budget from a business perspective. Thing number two that you need to be aware of is that one of the most common mistakes is that students will give me a project and tell me that A is going on, whatever A happens to be, and they'll give me some analysis or a diagram or something like that where B is what is happening. I'll give you an example. Students will tell me there is a shortage, and then they'll show me a diagram where they've shifted a supply curve. Well, that's not a shortage. Or they'll say that supply has changed, and then they'll give me a diagram with a shortage. And there's a right and a wrong way to do that. The main thing is that you can't call the thing a shortage and then give me a diagram that doesn't show a shortage. You can't call a thing a shift in supply if you don't give me a diagram that shows a shift in supply. And along those same lines, students also still struggle with the notion that the quantity can change without the supply changing. If demand grows, you're going to get more product in the market. And a lot of times, demand for a product will grow and students will say, hey, that's a shortage. Well, no, because if you shift the demand curve out, you're going to get more quantity. How can you have more quantity if there's a shortage? That doesn't really make sense. So again, make sure that what you're showing me in your analysis is what you're actually telling me that you're showing me. That actually is probably one of the top 5 mistakes that students make. The other mistake that students make is they try to write an essay. And if you will notice, this semester, our primary method of communication was drawing diagrams in a PowerPoint slide. That's what I recommend that you do. We've shown you this same diagram with the same axes virtually all semester because that's the main tool that we use in order to communicate in economics. So make sure that you do that. Now, along the same lines, the idea that someone will show me A and tell me that it's B, I'll have an example for you. A few years ago, I had a student that, as their project, told this very good story. They said, hey, I'm a non-traditional student, and I've returned to school, and here's what happened when I returned to school. I went from working full-time to working part-time, and then I ended up having to drive much further in order to get to school. And because of that, I had to get rid of my large gas-guzzling pickup truck that I loved. And then he said, this is an example of how preferences change. You just told me that your budget changed, and then you said your preferences changed. I hope you see the disconnect. And of course, the student didn't draw this out. They just kind of wrote it up. Well, this is a perfect example where you could draw an indifference curve and you could draw a budget constraint, and then you could move that budget constraint in a parallel fashion and show how you landed on a different indifference curve, and as a result, the quantity of whatever it was you were consuming changed. The reality is that he still loved that big gas-guzzling truck. Who doesn't love a big gas-guzzling truck? I drive a big gas-guzzling truck. And the reality is, as soon as he can afford another gas-guzzling truck, I promise you he's going to get one because his preferences didn't actually change, his budget changed. So remember, if A is going on and you say B is going on, I'm going to kick it back to you and say, think about that some more. I hope this helps you overcome some of the common mistakes that I see. This project is not intended to be a very difficult project. A lot of times students feel they have to give me a term paper. No, you don't give me a term paper. I am looking for 2 PowerPoint slides that are short, accurate, and to the point. The most direct way to do that is, of course, to draw some kind of diagram and describe what's going on in the diagram. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. I'll make sure to put a link to the other video somewhere where you can get a hold of it.